Welcome again, dear ones, to this little series of messages that we have entitled Coffee and Comfort, Tea and Truth. Just as you might want to pause during the course of your day, maybe even to have a cup of coffee, you can just sit down and I share just a few words of encouragement, hope, and I trust blessing with you. Today, I just want to share about a beautiful little English word. It's an old word. In fact, it's about 750 years old. First used around about 1250 or so. It's the English word nevertheless. Nevertheless. It's a word we don't commonly use now, but certainly in the times of the translation into what we now call the King James Bible, it was quite commonly used. In fact, you'll hear it over 70 times or so in that particular translation. But it's a word that really says, although things may look one way, the reality is there is another way. And if it's not happened now, it will happen soon. Nevertheless, it's a lovely word. I think it's a good word for us to use in this season of time, because as we go through this testing time, this season of challenge, God is still a God of nevertheless. Despite what we might be hearing on our news channels, or even perhaps from well-meaning friends over the telephone or on Facebook, nevertheless, God. We need to hear his voice, the voice of the nevertheless God. The God who turns situations and circumstances around. The God whom, though we may view things one way, has a very different way of seeing and interpreting things. The God who is God of nevertheless. Hear his word this morning. We share some examples. Perhaps when anxious thoughts wake you up in the middle of the night. Nevertheless, God says, don't be afraid, for you are deeply loved by God. Be at peace, take heart, and be strong. That comes from Daniel 10, verse 19. Or maybe when you're feeling very alone and very vulnerable. Nevertheless, God. For he says in Hebrews 13:5, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you. Or maybe when you're feeling it's just all too much. The nevertheless God would want you to remind yourself of the verse that's found in Philippians 4:13. For I can do everything with the help of Christ who gives me strength. When the trials and even the temptations of life press down upon us, nevertheless, God is able to help us when we are being tested. And when it appears that everything is lost. Nevertheless, God says that he is able to accomplish infinitely more than we might think or ask. Ephesians 3:20. That's the God who is the God of nevertheless. Turn to him, trust him, hear his voice. Nevertheless, God.